investors are buying the wrong houses. Here are the top 6 mistakes that investors make when they're buying their investment properties.
So this is such an interesting topic because I see this all the time with investors and, um, you know, and I see it with home buyers too, to be honest. It's not just investors. It's like they don't think through the investment and they're kind of just blindsided by what looks the prettiest. And that's why flips do so well. And I think this is going to be a really good topic. So let's jump into the first thing is they're buying with emotion instead of math.
I think it's huge because when investors walk into a house, oftentimes you say, "Oh, I could live here. I would love living here." And they look or they make decisions based upon emotions, like you said, but they need to look at the numbers. You need to look at it from a strategic vantage point versus this feels nice or this feels good. That doesn't work when it comes down to it.
Yeah, and when I tour investors around, especially like 1031 investors that have to buy something, we'll go look at 12 things and we'll write down the ones that they like. And I always, during the whole tour, they'll be like, I really like that one on whatever, Vista. And I'll be like, yep, we just got to see how the math is. Like, I always just keep saying, oh, yep, we just got to see how the math is when we get home, because I got to go in and, the ones they like, I put in like the rental and the, obviously like the loan cost and everything else. But at the end of the day, a lot of people do buy. And I always tell investors, though, you can't hate it. Like, that is a big thing for me. Like, even if the numbers work and this is the best one financially, if you hate it, then you shouldn't get it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, because like sometimes they just can't see around it. Like, I just hate this area. I just don't like, and I'm like, you know what? Even though this is the best math, we should go with this other one that's almost as good because I don't want you to hate something that you buy because you have to see the potential. And if you don't see the potential, even if I see the potential, like you can't, I just almost feel like it's not going to do well for you because you're just going to be like, no one would want to live here. This kitchen's so small. Like no one would want to do, so I do try to work it around with people. But at the end of the day, you don't have to be in love with what you buy, but you can't hate it.
Yeah, you have to follow your instincts a little bit. I work with an investor and he's acquired 50 or 60 properties over the past 5 years. And, we were going to see one. We were excited to go tour it on the first day it was. And the math, like it worked. Everything checked out. But he's like, you know what? I just don't know. I just have a feeling about this. I'm not vibing with this property. And we passed. We passed because he just had a feeling and it was not that he hated it. He just didn't like it. And even though the numbers work, we passed. So sometimes that's what you got to do.
There is that, right? But then there's that emotional response that's, you're not thinking logically. And I've actually done this with one property. Like I bought a property. I love the property. It's my favorite property. Ken's always like, you need to get rid of it. I'm like, no, this is like my favorite property. He's like, so the favorite property you have does not cash flow. I'm like, I know, but I love it and I can't get rid of it. But it's really close to cash flowing. But it's negative and it sucks. Like I will never do it again. I will never buy a property that's negative again because every time something breaks, I have to feed the property. Every month when I go to pay the mortgage, I have to feed a little bit to the property. Now, eventually rents will go up enough that it will balance out, but it could be like 5 years from now, and so I won't ever do it again. But I did it one time myself. I love everything about this property. And I see the potential in it. But when you're eating negative cash flow month after month, luckily I have positive cash flow from a bunch of other things to easily cover that. But if it was literally coming out of my paycheck, like it would suck so badly.
Or if it's your only property, or you're dollar cost averaging some of the cash flows from your other properties, like you mentioned. But if that's your only property, you're going to second guess, like, why did I get into this? And this is bad, even though it's not. It was just, maybe not the best, but as long as you like it, I mean, that does help a little bit.
It does. Well, so let's go on to number 2, because number 2 is the one I see like all the time. And this is this turnkey illusion. And flippers do a lot of it. Like we'll go into like a flip. So like I'll show, somebody a bunch of houses and they just fall in love with the flip. But to me, what do they call it? A lipstick on a pig or whatever.
Yeah.
Because
Yep.
yes, you have this turnkey property and it's way too nice to be a rental, in my opinion. Like, it's like you'll rent it, assuming it's in a good area, a decent area, you'll rent it easier than a property that, let's say, needs some work. However, you're going to be paying so much more for it when on this other property, if you just did floor and paint, which might be like, I don't know, less than $10,000, you're going to be able to rent it for almost the same amount. And a lot of times these flips are 40, 50 on a cheap home, $1,000 more.
Yeah. And so there you go, where it's like, okay, pay 50 grand for something that's a little more ready. And it could be just lipstick on a pig, where it's okay, they painted, they made it pretty, but they didn't do the higher dollar meaningful costs, or they covered things up. Like, you don't necessarily know what you're getting, where if you buy something where you can actually see what's going on, you make the sweat equity investments yourself, whether that be, paint, flooring, maybe it needs a new roof or some windows, things like that, but you're able to buy it at such a more competitive price that even after you put those dollars into it, you're still money ahead from buying the turnkey one, So it really is.
Well, what I see a lot is, on those flips, like, they don't do the roof. They don't do anything that's not aesthetic. So the HVAC system a lot of times is still old. The windows are still old. They just kind of do the kitchen, the bathrooms, the floor. It looks great. And they take out walls sometimes, so it's nice and open. I've never bought a flip, and I'm not completely opposed, but they do cover up things. Like, I almost bought a flip one time, and I went back for like the third time, and I ran into this neighbor next door, and she just pulled me aside. She goes, woman to woman, this thing had so many holes in the sidings, and they just plastered right over it. So in my mind, I'm like, that's water. There's probably mold in there. I mean, she kind of saved me from it, because I really was thinking about it, but I was nervous about that kind of stuff. And so that I kind of prefer a home that's been owner occupied and well taken care of over a flip. Because a lot of times these flips, they buy them dirt cheap because they're like falling apart, right? I mean, they're not going to buy a house at market and flip it. They're getting these houses for cheap. And I don't know. I'm always drawn, when I bought a house, a 1031 a couple years ago, there was a flip and there was, one that needed a little bit of work. And I ended up buying the one that needed a little bit of work. But the truth is that it just was well taken care of. And I knew that. And with floors and paint and some new fixtures, it looked so much better.
Yeah. And if you compare those two properties, the flip versus the one that needed a little bit of work, they could essentially be the same property, but one has a wildly better return. And that's where that sweat equity is nice to come into it, you're not paying premium or top dollar for something that's already done. And sometimes it's nice if you're an absentee investor, not in the area, and it's an easy button, but it's still something to like stop and think twice about.
Well, the other thing I've noticed about flips is, they're not meant to be rentals. I mean, you can rent them, but that's not the goal when the person is doing the flip. So they have very trendy cabinets. Like, their cabinets, like, I don't know about where you're at, but here, like, green is like this new thing. It's like an olive green, and it's really trendy, and it looks really good. But to me, see, that's too trendy for me, because if that goes out in 5 years, now I got to paint the cabinets, and, so...
Yeah.
That's something else to think about, is like, how trendy is this design, and is it going to hold over for 5 or 10 years, or is it something that's really trendy that it's going to sell right now, but then you're going to have to do it because your tenant base is going to be like, oh, green cabinets. No, like, I want, white or black, or just something that's more, neutral. Right. And so I don't know. So I think of that too, because, whenever I do remodel my rentals, I do they're not trendy, because also you want something that everyone's going to like any tenant can walk into, it matches their furniture, you don't want green cabinets that, some people love, some people hate, it doesn't go with their furniture, all this different stuff. Right. And so
I'm not doing painted cabinets in any of my units, because that's just it.
I know.
Yeah, they chip,
I know.
and you can't fix them. So.
I know. Unfortunately, I've learned that the hard way. I've done it in 2 of my 5, and you're right. And yes, they do chip, and and then you got to pay to fix them. So I've learned that the hard way myself. And then the other thing is like if the tenant, some people think, oh, there's already a tenant there. So that's really good for me because it's just there's already a tenant. But I don't like that. That would not be a net positive for me because I don't know anything about this tenant. Like I am very picky on my tenants. There's credit requirements. There's, make sure they're not a felon. There's income requirements. And now I'm inheriting this tenant that this person doesn't mind giving away. So why? Like, are they paying their rent? Yeah. We had one time where the tenant was a hoarder and we were able to sell the property sight unseen. It was during COVID. And that person inherited, they paid, they were a great tenant as far as that goes. They had been there for like 10 years. But, you know, when they do flip that unit, they're going to have a lot of issues because she was a hoarder.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just really wild when it comes to that. And, which brings us to our next point, buying in the wrong area. Like it could be a good area, but it's the wrong good area.
Yes. I deal with this a lot of times with investors too. They're like, I wouldn't want to live in this area. And I'm like, yeah, but you're not living in this area. And you're not your tenant demographic, right? Like you're live in a big house and you're married with, 3 kids and like you're not the person that's going to be renting in a working class environment where, maybe they have 1 kid, maybe it's a single parent. Like I have a lot of single parents with 1 or 2 kids. Like they're not renting your house. Like your house is not a rental, and your area is not a rental area either.
Yeah. Especially like in larger metro areas, you have to think about where are my tenant demographic going to be commuting to work. They're not going to live in a high dollar, like premium or luxury area if it's, an hour to commute to wherever they're working type of a thing. So yeah, like you said, you as an investor are typically not your tenant demographic. So you have to put your tenant hat on and be like, okay, would I want to live here if I was paying rent? What's my competition? How far is the commute to, work type of thing? And keep that all in mind because a property in a Class A neighborhood isn't always a Class A investment. I mean, if you buy something in a Class A, premium neighborhood, your cash flow or your return might not be as good. So you really have to dial it in.
So I see this mistake all the time, and it's not really with my investors. I see it when I'm looking at rentals on Zillow because I always price out, different areas. I'll see people, they buy a house in a nice area. They want $4,500 a month in rent, and it just sits and sits and sits. I'm like, who the hell is paying $4,500 a month in rent? Like your average tenant. Sure, you might get lucky. Yeah. A doctor might fly into Scottsdale and want to live there for a year with his family and do that. Your average tenant has a cap. And that's what I try to tell people. Like you don't, in our area, like I would say a good rental price is like maxing around $500,000, right? But I see people like, oh, this $750,000 house looks so good. And I'm like, yeah, but your $500,000 house might get $2,700 a month in rent. Your $700,000 a month house probably will get $29,000 or $2,900 in rent because there's a cap. Like in our area, in my opinion, it's around $3,000. Like people are not paying more than $3,000 in rent in large amounts, right? Like I don't know, what do you think that it is in your area? Because your real estate's cheaper.
Yep, our real estate's cheaper. It's all relative, but I would say for a really nice unit, you're looking around $1,500. You might get up to $1,700 if it's absolutely pristine and there's certain utilities and things included. But really, for a nice unit, you're looking at $1,500 is the high end.
Yeah, and so that's kind of so on my property that was negative, I don't want to say I made that mistake because I kind of knew that I was going to be negative going in, but the most I've ever rented that property for is $3,000 and it was $600,000. And that's where the discrepancy came in as far as it doesn't cash flow because it would at 5, but it doesn't at 6. And so I think that $500,000 mark's important because sometimes, like you said, you're taking people around and they're like, oh my God, this $700,000 house is amazing. And I'm like, yeah, but this is a house you live in. This is not a house you rent. There's a difference.
Yeah.
But then the other thing that I see is people try to save money. So they want to go get a house outside of town in a good area for $400,000, right? Because they're trying to save that $100,000. But the problem is, to your point, there's no jobs. So like a tenant is very different than a homeowner. A homeowner might live farther from their job because over time, they don't know where they're going to work. Maybe, they want their kids to go to a certain school. They want to have a certain kind of house that they can't afford. A tenant doesn't really think like that. A tenant is like, okay, this is like 15 minutes from my job. Like I would say most tenants live within 20 minutes from their job. At least, I'm in a bigger city, right?
Yeah.
So
Yep.
It's rare that a tenant is going to like live 45 minutes from where they work, because why would they do that? This is not their forever home. They're looking for convenience, and a lot of times what I see with like couples is they'll try to live in the middle of both of their jobs, somewhere where each person has like a 20, maybe 30-minute drive from work, And so that's why I get nervous when you're like, okay, let's invest outside of town. I'm like, okay, but they don't work there. So they definitely have a 45-minute drive, and it's going to be hard for you to find good tenants that want to live that far away, even for less rent, because their rent price, it might be $300-$400 a month cheaper, let's say. Okay, but how much gas are they spending to get there? What's the convenience worth? And most tenants will pay more for convenience.
Yeah, because it's not only gas, but time and everything else that goes with it. So then it ends up being a temporary tenant, and you're going to have the high turnover, So you might be able to rent it, but you're not going to get that long-term tenant that you're looking for, that all of us landlords like and appreciate.
You want to have options when you have tenants. You want to have options. So let's move to number 4. I like this one. The layout and functionality mistake.
Yes. So bedroom and bathroom mix, if you're looking at, like, let's just say 4-bedroom, it sounds great, but it only has 1 bathroom. Well, if you have a family and you're renting out a 4-bedroom, 1 bathroom is a huge mistake, So if you switch that to like a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, okay, you're losing a bedroom, but you're gaining a bathroom. Which one's more rentable? It's not always all about the bedrooms or a specific unit mix. You have to look at the property as a whole, because if there's 4 bedrooms, then is there enough parking, or is there just 1 parking, garage or whatever? So you have to look at everything, the layout, the functionality of the home, because bad floor plans, if you, can't envision yourself living there or how it would be used, then it's just going to be a bomb.
Yeah, and I do think the 1 bathroom, I don't have any properties with 1 bathroom. I would only do it if it was priced so well that it would easily cash flow, because you're going to take a rental hit on that, because most people, like roommates, are going to want 2 bathrooms. Families are going to want 2 bathrooms. Like a mom is not going to want to share a bathroom with her teenage boys. You know what I mean? Like it's just not something people want to do. And so I do agree with that one. And also even the garages in warm weather, like it's not just cold weather. Here it gets so hot, people do like to have a garage. I do have a property with just a 1 car instead of a 2 car. And that's not really been too much of a pushback. I think a lot of people use part of their garage as storage anyways, but I think at least 1 car garage is important as well.
Yeah. And that's interesting that you don't have any properties with, only 1 bathroom, because almost all of my properties just have 1 bathroom, and there's just a couple that have like a bath and a half or whatever, but that's just the way things are built. So
it is. Yeah. And I'm from Ohio, and like my brother has a 3-bedroom house and it has 1 bathroom. Like I think it's more common in like the Midwest markets and more of like the northern markets. For whatever reason, in our market, it's not common to just have 1 bedroom or 1 bathroom. Like almost all properties have 2, unless it's like a 2-bed condo. Occasionally it'll have 1.
Yeah. Interesting.
But my brother has a family of 6 and they all share a bathroom, and I'm like, oh my God.
Oh, I couldn't do it.
I know. No. Exactly.
Yes.
So the appreciation gamble is a good one too. The mistakes that investors make. I always invest for cash flow, because at the end of the day, I'm not really planning on selling any of them. A, but B, like you just don't know. Like you don't know what the market for sure is going to do in the next 5 years. You have no idea.
Well, so like you just said, it is a gamble. So appreciation, yes, it is one of the ways that real estate can pay you over time and factor it into your return, but it's not a given. It's not a guarantee. I like to think of appreciation as the cherry on top. You're not actually realizing those gains unless you sell. So if you're planning to hold a property for a long time, cash flow is first and foremost paramount over any of the other of the other things. So appreciation, yeah. I mean, cash flow keeps you solvent. You have to focus on your cash flow.
Absolutely. And let's move into short term rental fantasy because I think a lot of the cash flow people calculate. Sometimes it doesn't work on a long term rental, so they try to solve it for a short term rental. And I will tell you, in the Phoenix market, Airbnbs are. It's been rough for that, a lot of them. And a lot of the sellers that I've had that are in distress are Airbnb sellers because they thought they were going to be making, $10,000, $14,000 a month on something that long term would be about 3,000 a month, maybe, like top 3,000 a month. And so it's not Airbnb has slowed down, or at least maybe the supply has went up, and now they're only making like 8 or 9,000, but their mortgage is 7. So now they're in this tight pinch after expenses and management fees and, running an Airbnb for essentially free if you're not making any money. It's, it sucks.
Yep, it's a grind. And that's where you have to always plan for it. Would this property cash flow if I had a long-term tenant? Like, yes, it's great if you're renting it out furnished and getting a premium or putting it on Airbnb, but you can't have all of your eggs in one basket. If it only works with an Airbnb price, you're probably not looking at the right investment.
Exactly. You want to be able to negotiate that down. That's why it's so important to know the rental price and to know what you're putting down, because then when we go look at these houses, we can say, does this one cash flow? We can only go look at things that cash flow. We don't have to go, we know what we have to offer. Like, okay, it's listed for, $550. Well, it cash flows at $480. So that's what we have to either wait out for or offer at. And it's just math, right? It's not emotion. It's just math. And I will tell you, so I was telling you earlier, so I'm running an Airbnb for a month. This is like my experiment that I'm in the middle of. And, it's not worth the extra money. I mean, long story short, I'm just doing it for 30 days, thankfully. I have one lady, thankfully. But, I'm only, right now, I think I'm like breaking even as what I would have made it as a long-term rental. I think when I might be up like $300, but it's definitely not been worth $300 between setting the furniture up, between, she called me the other day because the ice maker wasn't working. And she told me ice is very expensive for her to buy. So now I'm sending her ice trays because, I don't know why. I can't get the handyman out there in the next 2 weeks before she leaves, even though that's her expectation. We've already had a clogged toilet. They already shut off the water because the toilet was running. Like, it's a headache. Like, this is a headache.
Yes.
And normally these minor plumbing issues are the responsibility of my tenant. So I haven't dealt with plumbing issues in such a long time, like minor, like toilets running, toilets clogged, like stuff like that. And now I've already sent somebody twice, which has cost me like $150, which is cheap because I have great contractors, but still, and we're only halfway through, so this $300 profit that would be on top of my long-term rental, it's slowly being chipped away. And the great news is we did this deal off Airbnb, so I don't have to worry about reviews. But if you throw reviews onto that, like, oh, she's going to complain if I don't get someone out here today to fix it kind of thing, then now it's a whole other thing, So to me, I'm like, man, you better be making money. I talk to people that do Airbnb around here, and the truth is the luxury Airbnbs do much better. So if you're going to buy like $1 million house, there's not that many. There are Airbnbs here, so there's not a big supply, and they have 8 or 9 bedrooms. Then yes, you can really kill it here because, like I said, there's only a couple handful of those. But if you're doing this 3-bed, 2-bath deal, there's like a bazillion of them, and it's a lot of competition.
And see, that's interesting because obviously I come from a very rural market. So what we see or what I've noticed is Airbnbs in these like small towns, right? Like think 500 to 2,000 people, like small towns. People are using them for like family reunions, class reunions, funerals or weddings, where they'll rent them out for like, 3-4 days. You probably couldn't do a week minimum, but they work and they're just looking for like a cute little place to hang their hat because the closest hotel's 30 minutes away. So it's just so interesting to like hear your market versus mine, but it's all relative, and there's real estate works in either market. Just you got to know what you're looking for.
Well, and you have to know the price point and what you want to deal with. You know, all the time I hear investors say like, I want to get a place in Michigan because I'm from there, and then I'm just going to Airbnb it out when I'm not there. Well, that kind of mentality gets you in trouble because you're kind of like, well, I'm going to use it and then it's going to kind of just pay for itself and I don't need to make any money. But when you want to use it is probably at the peak rental season, typically, right? Like you want to use it in, let's pick on Michigan. You want to use it in July to go to the lake. Okay. Well, so does everyone else. So who wants to rent the place in December? Freezing cold in Michigan, not you and not a lot of people, right? And so, but you also have to have someone check on it because, you know, if it's empty, you have frozen pipes, you have, you know, like roof issues, you know, there's a lot of things that can go on if somebody's not there to watch a house. So it's like, okay, so what's the point of owning it if you are hurting your finances by being there when it's most profitable and then people don't want to be there when it's not? Now, if you can have something like a California market where it's kind of good all year round, you know, maybe that makes more sense depending on the numbers. But like a lot of these times, these are, you know, very seasonal rentals and you're going to want to rent it in the same season that you're going, you know, want to be there, right? So you're not going to be really making as much money as you think.
Yeah, you have to be mindful of it. I mean, it'd be different if you wanted to go, your family's there and you want to go and visit over Christmas and New Year's. Well, great. Okay, it's probably open and you reserve that high season for your investment and just know that ahead of time. But if you plan to use it during prime peak season and expect it to pay for itself, it's not going to happen. I mean, go dream on.
Well, and also Airbnbs always have made me nervous because you also have that the regulation in the cities, right? Like cities are regulating this. You're now having to sign up for licenses. You know, it's not like a long-term rental where the cities like them generally. Generally, the cities don't like them. They take away from housing. They cause issues for your neighbors. You know, they beat you up too with the taxes really high on them.
Yeah. Yeah, there's all of those factors where you really need to dial it down to what municipality are you purchasing in, what are the rules. Certain cities only give so many permits, so you really need to know what you're doing if you're going to go that route.
Well, and you know, it's interesting too. So my Airbnb tenant, we were initially on Airbnb. Like that's how she found me, everything else. But I got, you know, I had talked to Airbnb. I'm like, you're sure there's no more fees? I want to make sure I'm pricing this out right. They held so much money back for tax that I was going to be completely not profitable. Like I was going to be way under, like $1,000 under what I should have been for my monthly rental. So I had to cancel on Airbnb. And luckily I had already reached out to her. So she had my number. And I just told her the reason I canceled your trip is because I was making like no money on tax. I was like, I can actually give you a discount on what you were paying on Airbnb and still be more profitable if you just pay me directly. And she's like, yeah, I have no problem doing that. So it's these little things that like I didn't even consider. I didn't even realize how much money that they were going to hold back for tax because in Arizona we have, you know, I don't know exactly, like it's a hotel tax almost, you
like
know, like
the lodging tax or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's super expensive. And I was like, oh my God, like I'm like $1,000 like less than I even need to be. I mean, the tax was over $1,000. So I was able to give her like $500 off the booking and then recoup that $1,000, you know? And so for me, you know, these are the things that people don't know and realize. It's like, yeah, it sounds good. You know, you're charging, you know, $8,000 for the month, but what are you paying in tax on that? And what are you paying in cost on that? And is that covering your base? And how much would you make on a long-term tenant, which is way easier? And how much are you covering on your base? Because to your point, say I'm making $1,000 extra a month on Airbnb, it's not worth it. Like it's so much more work. It's not worth it. And it's not guaranteed. So it's like, yeah, you might be up, you know, for us, our high season, like April, you might be up $4,000, but all summer, nobody's renting that thing.
Yeah.
You know,
hotter than blazes and it's your low time. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you're just constantly looking for new tenants where for me, I just get a tenant in, they're there for at least a year minimum. And they just, you know, they're responsible for minor repairs and I don't get that many calls.
Yeah, which is great. And I think when you set expectations up on the front end, as an investor, it's like, okay, the first toilet clog is covered and after that you're on your own. Or if the plumber finds a foreign object in the toilet, like kids throw something down or whatever, that's on you. And so there's all of those things where you don't get to really dictate that in a short-term
Nope.
Airbnb type style situation as you can with a long-term tenant. So lots of
Absolutely.
different factors.
You
Yeah.
you learn a lot as you've been a landlord. Like I've been a landlord now for 10 years, and you do learn a lot. Like plumbing issues, first $150 are covered by the tenant. Now, if it were ever to come back where there was like roots in the line, I mean, I'm going to cover that. But 98% of the time it is. A couple weeks ago, it was an earring in the toilet. The toilet's just clogged. There's all these things. And I do get it after $150 because even like the earring in the toilet, it was like $225. I'm fine. They get the first 150. I get the second 75. I'm good with that because what I don't want and what I had initially was hey, I got a clogged toilet. I need a handyman. Hey, and then, you're just shelling out $100 here, $100 there. And they don't care what they're flushing down the toilet because they're not paying for it. So when you transfer that to them, then they do start to care about, those kind of things. And I don't mind getting the balance as long as they're kind of chipping in.
Exactly, because I think it was maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago I had a plumbing issue and it wasn't an earring, but they, those the flushable wipes are not flushable. Like they are not freaking flushable.
Yes.
It's false advertising. So
yes.
Don't
they are flushable because they go down the toilet, but that's about it.
Yeah, exactly. So we had to have a visit and it was all good and we figured it out, but if it happens again, hey, it's not on me. So
exactly, right? Well, and I think that the biggest thing with this video was, the best investments aren't always the prettiest. You have to get through that. Like, I love this place. It's so beautiful. Like, get through that, and then just get into the numbers and the area. Like, do people want to live here, and what is the rent?
Yeah. So if you guys want more information or any expertise, download our investor guide. The link will be below, and we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, absolutely. See you guys next week.
Bye.